Chapter 19. Till I Am Myself Again. July 4th, 1984, Baker Creek. The mid-afternoon sun was blinding after the cool dark of the hospital lobby. Irene was forced to squint and grab her mom's hand, allowing herself to be guided to the car, groggy, rubbing at the thick bandages on her face. Her mom turned and stayed Irene's free hand. "Don't touch it." "But it hurts." Behind her, Papa made a weird choking sound. He was wearing a funny white collar, and he had a band-aid on his forehead. He noticed her and dropped his eyes to the ground. Was Papa angry at her? She slumped into the car and rested her bandages against the glass. One side of her head felt like it was on fire, and pressing on it helped. The doctor had given her some pills. They made her feel dizzy and sleepy, but he told her it would make the pain go away. He must have given her the wrong pills though, because it wouldn't stop hurting. Mom was driving, the radio was off, and no one was talking. Why were they at the hospital? She shut her eyes and tried to remember what had happened, and slowly, little bits of movie clip memories came back. She remembered the doctor, the big needles, and the nurse with the thread. She remembered riding in Papa's grain truck, and then riding in an ambulance. She remembered Anna looking at her with her head bent in a funny way, and she remembered Papa screaming. Anna. Irene opened her eyes and scanned the car. Where was Anna? She had been in the ambulance too, and Irene had seen her in the hospital. "Papa?" She tugged at his shoulder. "Papa, we need to go back. We forgot Anna." Papa went all stiff, and then he turned in his seat. His eyes were big and red, and he had a runny nose. He looked at her, blinked, and then turned back and covered his face with his hands. He started making that weird choking sound again, but this time it was more high-pitched. It sounded like he was laughing. Did she say something funny? No, those weren't laughs. He was crying. Why was Papa crying? "Mom, what's wrong with Papa? Where's Anna?" Her mom's mouth tightened into a straight purple line. She gave Papa an angry look, and then just stared at the road. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Irene could see dark blue veins popping out of the white skin. "Anna isn't coming home. Buckle your seatbelt." Irene spent the rest of the day in her room, staring across the hardwood at her sister's empty bed. They didn't eat supper that night, but at some point, her mom brought up a sandwich and milk. She was lost to a drugged sleep long before fireworks lit up the eastern sky. July 4th, 1998, Jordan Road. A grinding rumble and jackhammer vibrations snapped Irene awake. Her eyes popped open, and she gaped at the slanted horizon. The wheels furrowed through the embankment's mud-gravel slurry, and she could feel the truck pitch further into the ditch. Her pulse ramped up to full sprint, and for a moment she froze, terrified and disoriented, but before the truck could roll, her pursuit driving skill kicked in. With intuitive perfection, she pressed the clutch and eased her truck onto the asphalt. The horizon evened out, and the steering regained its tight grip on the road. Holy shit. She rolled down her window and forced a few calm breaths before giving up and resuming her dog-like panting. That was close. She let out a halting breath, wiped her face, and got her bearings. She was about 7 miles out of town. The last thing she remembered was crossing Sherritt's Bridge. With guarded care, she shifted into highway gear and continued down Jordan Road. The open windows buffeting wind turned up a miniature dust devil, and a few gas receipts fluttered up like oversized ashes before whooshing past. The passenger's side footwell scattering of empty to-go cups stirred and belched their syrupy black dregs onto the floor mat. She cranked the radio volume. Soon Emmylou Harris and A.M. Fuzz accompanied the deafening wind blast and the ringing of blood in her ears. Looking around, the scene was all too familiar. She had responded to countless fatal incidents. Countless fatal incidents where the vehicle's windows were down. The radio, if it still worked, was tuned to something up-tempo, and there was spilled coffee mixed in with the bloodstains. She could already read the headline, "RPD Officer Killed in Single Vehicle Rollover," and shuddered with the gut-punch realization that she had nearly become another statistic for the hazards of driving while sleep-deprived. In actuality, it was nearly as dangerous as driving drunk. Papa set down his can and smiled as he honked the truck's air horn and waved at Sheriff Poole. Irene and Anna waved as well. Sheriff Poole was a nice guy, and he had such a neat car, fast too. Irene let out a little yelp as Anna climbed over her, and she scooched to the window as they traded spots. "Papa, will there be fireworks at the park this year?" Anna asked. Papa turned and smiled. His big horse's teeth were so white against his rough face. "There always is. Why? Do you think Sheriff Poole will let us watch him light them again?" He sipped his drink. "They're better to watch from far away, don't you think?" Irene shook her head and leaned over. "Nuh-uh. It's fun watching the..." She searched for the word. "The fuses. They light up like bombs." Papa chuckled. "Like bombs." "Stop it." She mopped her feverish forehead with a shirt sleeve. Soft blue cotton, faded to the color of winter sky. Stop thinking. She blinked and made a vigilant effort to concentrate on the highway's chipped yellow dashes. Pay attention to the road, don't crash. It was easier said than done. She had slept 4 hours total in the past 2 nights, and her capacity to complete even the simplest of tasks was alarmingly low. She wiped her face. 4 hours sleep, 7 pounds lost, 1 court date missed, and $12 wasted on useless sleeping pills. She was falling apart, plain and simple. Don't think about it. She swallowed and blinked. Her truck staggered through a frost boil, patched with quarter down. Metal tinked from the truck bed. She glanced back to inspect. The shovel was still there, but the plants had tipped over and spilled the dirt that fed them right back to the tailgate. She groaned. What am I doing? Don't think about that either. Irene reset her eyes to forward and ran a hand through her hair. Gordon's Creek Bridge loomed ahead, mossy green concrete girders like twin grave markers. Irene had to squint through the jungle of flowers, daisies and lilies mostly, to see her. Even then, all she could make out was the very front of her face, poking from out of the coffin. She looked like one of Mum's china dolls. Stop it! She rapped her temple with a balled hand. This must be what going crazy felt like, the overlapping of past and present, where everything felt like a waking dream. Is this what Dad felt like? The thought was like an ice water wake-up. No. Her ponytail slapped against her face as she shook her head. I'm not like him. Then why are you wearing his shirt and boots? She glanced at the western shirt and cowboy boots, and then caught sight of her own guilty eyes in the rearview mirror. I needed something to wear that I could get dirty. Sure you did. Why did you take them in the first place? This has been a long time coming. Somehow, before her little mental showdown could escalate into a shooting match, she managed to wipe the thought away. Taking advantage of the respite, she stole another glance at the cargo in the truck bed. The lilies might die, but the daisies should be okay. Daisies were tough, almost like weeds. Eyes ahead, the cut line was a few yards up, and she swung her truck off Jordan's Road blacktop, onto the baked mud. Yellow ribbons of torn police tape fluttered in the breeze. The road, heavily rutted by the wheels of countless RPD vehicles, commanded every bit of her attention, granting a continuation to her reprieve from the disconcerting flashes of half-suppressed memories. Her truck's rear axle thudded on loose torque arms, and the sagging front springs offered no cushion. It was a small blessing that the road had dried up, as even in four-wheel drive, she doubted her truck would have made the journey. A small smile turned at the corners of her mouth, and she ran an affectionate hand along the sun-crazed dashboard. My Rusty. Here she is, Irene. It hasn't run since Levi moved up to Cheyenne, but you can have her if you want her. Irene frowned, wiped a line of chaff and dried birdshit off the hood, and poked a boot tip to the flat front tire. It's pretty rusty. Although so much about Rusty was awful, she couldn't give him up. Perhaps the sense of freedom he had given her so many years ago still endured, or maybe it was his interior's sour musk of dairy barn that fostered some sort of perverse nostalgia for summers spent working on her uncle's farm. Rusty bumped toward the trees, and she strong-armed the front end back into the tire ruts. Stones clunked underneath, and paper-thin fenders slapped like mud-caked carpet. She winced as a fallen tree branch tangled and snapped underneath. With her bad luck, she'd probably end up ripping out her new muffler and tailpipe. Another expense, another headache. Her ill fortune seemed to hold off as Rusty came to a stop in an all-too-familiar spot, relatively intact. Irene killed the engine. Hot exhaust pipes clinked. A fly butted the windshield with dull-witted persistence, its tiny brain unable to deduce that freedom waited 6 inches away in the form of an open window. Flies and their simple traps. Irene Lindstrom in a trap set 14 years ago. She stepped out of the truck. Her father's boots, cowhide leather permanently spotted with manure and Baker Creek mud, worn soft to a second skin, kicked up plumes of dust as she made her way to the tailgate. Irene caught sight of her reflection in Rusty's side glass, and she stopped to frown. There weren't many sane young women who played dress-up with their father's old clothing. She was trying to put her past behind, and yet she was clutching to the familiar comforts of long ago. She was too sentimental, too much like her father. She was also too proud, too headstrong, too much like her mother. With a tired sigh, she straightened her hair and glanced at the spilled flowers. She put her hands on her hips and shook her head. Fine, you're going crazy, but contaminating a crime scene for the hell of it is plain stupid. Irene wiped her forehead. The shirt smelled like mildew, but she may have caught a whiff of tobacco and aftershave. Maybe, but it's worth a shot. She scooped the daisies back into the old ice cream buckets. The lilies, already wilted and crippled, were a lost cause, and she left them to be desiccated in the unusual summer heat. She grabbed 2 pails worth of the flowers, the long-handed spade, and continued down the cut line, past where she and Joe had found Darius Connor's windowless pickup. The spade's edged point made simple work of the loose dirt. Easy digging compared to the gumbo in the overgrown wilderness of her home's gardens. 2 feet away, a shallow trench and forgotten evidence tag marked the spot where Irene had discovered Madison Connor. Although Irene normally let Joe deal with victims' families, she was pretty decent at managing a person's grief. They had given practical lessons at police academy, but it was her mentorship with Joe that had honed her skills. "You've got to listen to them, Lindstrom. Let them know that you're not just some messenger boy, but don't take their troubles as your own. You've still got to be able to close that door and walk away." It had been surprisingly easy. She'd done it more times than she could count, but Irene couldn't even look at Victoria Connor. That hard face, that grim mouth, those watery pockets in the corners of her eyes. She was staring at her own mother. Feeling nauseous and short of breath, Irene turned her attention to the Connor family's door-side flower beds, some ornamental grass, tiger lilies, and daisies, lots of daisies. Madison Connor. She wasn't as pretty as Anne, but they were similar in age. Both girls were dead, in the hands of God, or those that loved, both the girls and their heavenly Father, were left to wonder where their deaths fit into his plans. Those who loved the girls were left to curse him, left to turn on each other in their anger and grief. Looking down at the transplanted perennials, Irene couldn't help but wonder what exactly she was hoping to achieve with this little stunt. The idea had come to her after an unending night of no sleep and sweat-soaked bedsheets. She had been turning it over for most of the day, letting it tumble and ingrain itself. Faced with the prospect of another fitful night in the incubator heat of her dark bedroom, it had become one of her few viable options. It was either this or seeing Doc Matheson. Was it any surprise that some RPD comedian had started calling getting drunk after a shift seeing Doc Matheson? Which version of seeing Doc Matheson did she plan on doing? She started down the turkey trail which would lead to the pond. The footprints cast into the kilned mud were like the surface of an asteroid. The ice cream pail coughed out clots of dirt as it slapped against her thigh, and she had the spade rested against her shoulder, just as her father would carry it. Irene turned away from the pond, down a path beaten through the ferns by RPD shoe heels, toward where they had found Darius Connor. She wondered what kind of relationship Madison Connor had with her father. No, Rainey. Hold the bowl like this, and keep a tight grip with this finger. Don't let the bowl touch your palm or it won't spin. Irene sighed and crouched down, depositing the pail near the man-sized hollow. The rain would collect there for some time, and she wondered if the plants would survive. Her mum would know. Mum would also know that something was up if you were planting flowers. Do you really want to tell her what you've been up to? No, not even maybe. Once more, the shovel made quick work of digging, and she was soon tamping soil which may still have runnels of Darius Connor's blood in it, around the base of the plant. She wiped her hands on denim cuffs and surveyed her work. It was a stupid idea, risky and poisonous to her career, but maybe this tiny act of mourning, both for the Connors' shattered family and her own, would exorcise the ghosts of past hurt. There were few options left, and either version of seeing Doc Matheson was undesirable, especially the drinking. Her father never drank after that afternoon. He also never laughed or sang. His guitar grew a thick coat of dust and was eventually packed away. He argued with his brothers. He and Mom slept in separate rooms, and when they fought, she called him a murderer. The spade tumbled off Irene's shoulder as hands went to temples. She shook her head and clamped her eyes shut, as if she was stepping out of a dark hospital lobby into blinding July summertime. No, I don't want to think about this anymore. This needs to work. It was no surprise that one evening, 11 months after that 4th of July, he didn't come in for supper. Irene dropped to one knee, and the all too familiar salty taste returned. No. Please. The flowers didn't help. Nice work, Lindstrom. You screwed up a crime scene. Please. You've got a problem. You're going crazy. You're finished. Too many voices in her head. Too many memories. She took a deep breath and could taste dust in the air. Dry Wyoming barn dust. When she finally found him, his face had turned purple. He had kicked off one boot and pissed his pants. He stayed that way until Sheriff Poole came to cut him down. A tiny gasp whistled through clenched teeth. She bit her knuckles and slumped to the gold dirt. She had been lying to herself. There was still one other option, and it was far more unpleasant than anything else. Irene rocked forward and began to cry. Her balance gave out, and she fell sideways into a bed of sagebrush and cheatgrass. Balled up, she committed herself to the Arklay Forest's soil. Here lies Irene Evelyn Lindstrom, her parents' daughter, born with her mother's thick waist, her father's height, cursed with her mother's pride, her father's recklessness. She cried, hugged her knees, and called out to a family that was 14 years dead. And somewhere in the trees, a crow cawed in off-tune consolation.